One of the big questions following the charges brought against 6 boys from a Toronto private school is how and why this could have allegedly happened. How does something like this happen, and why would a group of boys do what these teens are charged with? For more on this, we turn to Dr. Susan Lipkins. Dr. Lipkins is a psychologist specializing in bullying, hazing, harassment, and sexting. Doctor, welcome to you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, in these environments, beyond the boys themselves, who's responsible for enabling this kind of alleged behavior? Where does it come from?
Well, it comes from a tradition and a culture in which you have to prove that you're worthy of being part of the team or the group. What happens in terms of hazing is that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it usually happens in unsupervised or undersupervised locations that the kids can figure out pretty easily. So the administration should be able to figure it out as well and close those gaps.
Okay, what is the purpose of hazing?
Hazing is to maintain a hierarchy or to discipline. So when you're joining a group that has hazing as part of its culture, they will repeat it. They'll do onto you what has been done to them. And it maintains the pecking order. It's something that happens in human nature. However, hazing has gotten more violent and more sexualized in the last 20 years or so. So we see scenes like this, they've become very common.
Okay, why has it become more sexualized, do you think?
It's hard to determine that. I'm assuming that part of it is the internet and that it spreads, so kids learn about it and they go, hey, I'll try that. However, I think ultimately, in order to maintain that pecking order, they want to get somebody to be humiliated to the greatest extent as possible. And when you do it in a sexual way, you are doing it quickly and intensely, and there is no way out. The unfortunate part is that it's in front of a group, and in this case, it's amazing that they have 50 people who have actually seen it. Those are bystanders, and if we train those kids and those people to report or to intervene, we're more likely to stop this kind of behavior.
Okay, and the inspector talked about a potential cone of silence around this among the students themselves. Where does that come from?
You know what? I think the code of silence, it may also be part of human nature. We see it in preschool. But the code of silence is reinforced each time something happens. Coaches often say what goes on in the locker room stays in the locker room. Parents say what goes on around the family table stays in the family. So we are subtly telling people not to report. We talk about snitches. So the code of silence is something that we see in most groups that haze. Often the first thing that they learn is the cover story. What are we going to tell the authorities if we get caught? And I'm an expert witness in cases, and I read, one after another, they have the same story, and we all know that they're not telling the truth. They're not telling exactly what happened. They're telling what they've been told to tell in order to not disclose the actual events.
Okay, so this is premeditated. They know what they're going to do. They know the violence that they're going to inflict, including sexual assault?
Yes, I don't think they look at it as sexual assault, and I don't think they look at it as violence, and they certainly don't think they're going to get in trouble or have national attention like they're having right now. Typically, there's a hazing ritual where the kids who are now perpetrators have themselves been perpetrated. In other words, they've been the victim at some point, often of a sexual assault. Then they become a bystander. They watch as others do it, and eventually they feel like it's now they're the senior members. It's their turn to do unto others what has been done to them. And with each time, they want to add their own mark. When they add their own mark, they usually increase the violence or the sexuality just a little bit more. And so it becomes more intense, more humiliating every year.
So this sounds like prison.
I don't think so. Most people who are involved in hazing have not gone to prison, even those where somebody has died.
No, I mean, it sounds like what we understand happens in prison.
In prison. Yes, I mean, it could be. It happens in any group that wants to maintain the hierarchy.
Okay.
And they have a tradition of hazing.
Why does where does the acceptance of sexual violence in male organizations, male-dominant organizations come from versus female-dominant organizations?
Well, I have actually read about reports in hazing that are sexualized in women's teams as well as men's teams. I would say right now across the United States and Canada, sodomy is accepted and normed in high school athletic teams. Yeah, I don't see it the same way in girls' teams, although I do hear about nudity, about other kinds of penetration in girls' teams, and it's just not as common. It is very common, unfortunately, in the boys' teams. And I've been talking about it for the last 15 years. So it's about time that parents and everything, coaches and administrators really take this seriously.
Yeah. How do you prevent something like this from happening?
You change the culture. You have a culture of caring and concern. You have a culture of reporting. You train everybody from the headmaster down to every student about hazing and bullying and peer-on-peer violence. You make it clear as to what the consequences will be. You define hazing and sexual assault as sexual assault, and that it is, against the law. And most importantly, you have various ways to report this, and maybe rewards for reporting, anonymous ways to report, and you break that code of silence.
All right. Dr. Susan Lipkins, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.